The Sony 200-600 may be one of the most revered super telephoto zoom lenses ever made. Recently, Sony sent me over the Sony A1 to review alongside the Sony 200-600mm lens with the help of Hunt's Photo and Video. This lens is known to be incredibly sharp for a zoom lens and very capable in many ways alongside the internal zoom feature that it boasts. I really liked most of the things about it, but one of them I didn't. Let's get into it. So it's 2023 and I'm reviewing this lens that has been out for quite a while now. When it comes to the main factor of what makes a lens good and worthwhile, I think that it holds up to this one specific standard, and that's image quality. When it comes to image quality, this lens truly does live up to the hype. I had the opportunity to test it out through quite a few different types of lighting scenarios, and in each one it held up. I was never able to pick out any chromatic aberration in any of my shots, even when I was pushing to the extremes in my edits in horrible lighting scenarios. And I was even more impressed with the sharpness, however, as to me this matters most. Typically with a lens, I'll notice some minor infractions with the glass quality before getting to the point of seeing individual pixels themselves when zooming in on roughly a 50 megapixel shot, for example. However, with these shots on the Sony A1 50 megapixel sensor, I could zoom in all the way to the point of seeing individual pixels before I can notice any type of blur caused by the glass in the lens itself. This is ideal in a lens when the glass is so good that the only thing holding you back from sharpness is your camera sensor. The bokeh looks great in my opinion as well, and has a certain swirl and mood to it that looks really good in most shots for my opinion and my taste. Really, if all you care about is the main functionality of a lens, which is to achieve high quality imagery, you could end this review right here, and I'd tell you that this is the best IQ you can achieve in a lens for $2,000. But if you're looking towards a few other qualities of what makes a lens enjoyable and usable out in the field, well, that's where this can get a little bit more dicey. Since this lens is a bit old now, you'll notice that some of the features are a little out of date. Namely, there are three ways in which this is noticed to me. One, the tripod collar doesn't have any sort of snapping to lock function. So that means that you have to approximate the area in which it is perfect for a 0-degree tilt or a 90-degree tilt. Secondly, the tripod foot on it lacks the Arca Swiss mount that we see on many tripod foots in current times. So to me, this is actually kind of a big deal and would cause me to invest in a different tripod foot for the purpose of replacing it. So that's an additional cost for me as well if I was to buy this lens. Thirdly, the image stabilization is decently outdated and lower than most lenses that are made nowadays, and only contains an on or off switch with no modes to adjust it. It's definitely not horrible as it comes in at around 2 to 3 stops, but it's literally less than half of the 6 to 7 stops, for example, that I tested on the Sigma 60 to 600mm last month. Speaking of that 60 to 600mm, I'm also not a big fan of how the Sony 200 to 600 has a low-end focal length of only 200mm. This really keeps this lens exclusively for tighter wildlife shots and doesn't allow for much versatility as some of the other lenses with more wildlife scenic shots or even macro and landscape imagery. All these three things are not end of the world and deal breakers, but they are things you should be considering and may affect your experience and your capabilities out in the field. I'm happy to report that the autofocus is still snappy and great with it, and there are no problems there. If you saw my wildlife photography adventure out in the field with the Sony A1 a few weeks ago, you saw examples of how phenomenal this autofocus combo was in certain situations. And I can tell you that the Sony 200 to 600 definitely isn't the lens holding autofocus capabilities back. In regards to other lens build features, the lens feels very solidly built without being too heavy. It comes at a pretty standard weight of 4.5 pounds and is only slightly above what I would hope for. But the biggest compliment that I hear to the Sony 200 to 600mm lens is the fact that it has an internal zoom, as you'll notice when I pull it here. To this, I actually disagree. Call me crazy, but I actually really didn't like the fact that it has an internal zoom instead of an external. Now, why might someone like an internal zoom? For this, I've heard two main reasons. One, they say they can appreciate how the weight doesn't shift hardly as you zoom in and out. And two, they say that it helps weatherproof and keep dust and dirt out from entering the lens. To start by addressing issue number 2, personally, I've been shooting on push and pull zoom lenses, if they are zoom, exclusively for 7 years now. now. And I'm a huge stickler for dust spots and absolutely hate them, and they will drive me insane if I have any in my shots, particularly because I do YouTube video, and as a creator shooting video, they are extremely difficult to remove in video footage. Throughout this whole time I've used them, never once have I experienced any push-pull lenses getting dust inside the lens that caused any sort of problem. So personally, I think that this reason is used as a little more of a fear-mongering tactic, if you'd like to call it that, than having a very solid foundation in the reality of what may happen. In regards to the other issue, however, this is a valid point. It is very nice to be able to zoom in and out without a huge weight displacement adjustment going on when you are on a tripod. However, personally, I find that in my personal workflow, the situations where this truly matters to me is rare, and I could count the times on one hand that it would actually matter to me each year. So let me tell you about why I don't like the fact that it is an internal zoom lens. When out doing wildlife photography, things happen so fast, and these actions I need to be able to respond to happen so quickly in the moment. With the Sony 200-600, I found it taking myself much longer to twist my wrist around to find the zoom ring in order to zoom in and out, rather than to simply just push and pull. With a push and pull lens, in under a second, you can easily push out or pull in the focal length to whatever you prefer. However, with the internal zoom, it would often make me take a second to find the zoom ring and make sure my hand wasn't misplaced on the focus ring on accident. Then it would take me another second to kind of yank my wrist around and rotate it, leading to over double the time passing by as opposed to a push and pull. For me, these are valuable seconds in wildlife photography I'd rather not miss, and so I preferred the external zoom. All in all, to wrap up the pros and cons, this lens is phenomenal in terms of image quality and still shines through years after its creation. However, in features, it's not the newest, and for me personally, I do not like the internal zoom factor of it. But again, where it matters most in a lens, this thing brags over its competitors and doesn't fail in the slightest. As this lens is a Sony E-mount lens, I think this lens is for the Sony user who wants prime quality sharpness in their wildlife photography without being able to afford a prime quality lens. But if you're looking for a more up-to-date features or wider focal range lens, I'd highly recommend checking out something like the Sigma 60-600mm that I reviewed a month ago on this channel. If you want to see a review on the Sony A1 that I used to review with this lens, check out this video here in the end screen, and I'll see you guys next time.